So I want to say thanks for stopping by the channel yet again, and I want to talk a little bit about a video that I put out on Saturday, March 13th. Not so much rehashing that video, but touching on a conversation or two that it sparked. In that video, I talked about people saying that they stand strong with other people who are bold and outspoken or taking stands against governmental abuses of the Constitution and the we the people. And I very boldly called out Christians in particular for not being stronger to resist tyranny, to fight against the injustices that are happening in the United States today, violations of the Constitution. In my opinion, this is going to continue to get worse because people are being kowtowed all over the place. One of the tactics of the Marxist left, according to Saul Alinsky, is to isolate individuals, not institutions. You don't isolate the institution. You go for the individuals because individuals hurt easier, according to his 12 rules for radicals. They hurt easier than institutions do. And so they go after the individuals. They silence individuals. Say something that they don't like, silence them. Say something to call them out for their bad behavior, for violating their oath of office, let's say. Call them out for abusing the power that comes with their position. They'll go after you. The biggest problem is that the patriotic types tend to be very, I don't want to say self-absorbed. That's not the right word I'm looking for. The patriotic constitutionalist types tend to be very independent, tend to be very go it alone. It's that rugged individualism of Americans. And so oftentimes while we'll recognize that somebody else is doing something that's admirable, something that needs to be done, more often than not, we align ourselves with them ideologically without actually stepping up and doing anything to assist them or aid them, which is why you see so many people just fighting their own battles in court, fighting their own battles with employers, fighting their own battles with in their own communities. I can name right now at least I can name at least 10 to 12 people who are fighting their own court battles, suing their employers, former employers, suing cities, suing law enforcement for deprivation of rights and all these other things. And they're doing it alone. And so in talking about that video, I mentioned, and I want to say this quick as I get into the sum and substance of why I'm doing this. What we need to be doing is advancing one another. We need to be promoting one another. And there's I mentioned them before, Carter and Carrie of Unsafe Space have a phenomenal platform, and they interview other people with podcasts. They're not afraid of competition. So they actually interview other people about their podcast and talk about their podcast and promote their podcast. Carter and Carrie don't need to do that. They have no reason to do that. It doesn't, I mean, I suppose it probably can gain them followers as, as people cross over from one podcast to another, from one, show to another, one channel to another. I suppose that helps. But what it's doing is it shows that Carter and Carrie actually care about the fight that they're in. They care about the people who are fighting alongside of them. And as I said in my video about Philippians 2, I don't fight for myself because it would be easier for me to just not fight. There'd be a lot less stress, a lot less anxiety. There'd be a lot less discomfort in my life. I fight because I want other Christians to be able to continue to fight. So that's why I do this. Now, to the conversation that came up, because I called out Christians for not fighting more. Somebody that I love dearly brought up some good points. And this individual said, gosh, you have a family to take care of. Maybe you should consider that, because, this could be really, really hard on you, if things were to go south. And they're right. It could be. And so this video isn't about them. It's about the conversation that we had, and it's about a conversation that sparked with another person. Because the person who said that to me said, like, if I had to choose between providing for my family and taking a bold stand, I would provide for my family. And that really got me thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I wrong? Not is my position wrong, but am I wrong for fighting? Am I wrong for speaking out if it's could jeopardize my income, could jeopardize my stability? Not that anybody thinks I'm stable, mind you. And I think that may be one of those areas that could fall into the realm of being a gray area. Gray. It's a coincidence. I mean, I wear gray and black all the time. So, but it could be one of those places where it falls into the realm of being a gray area. Really could. It may not be right or wrong to fight. It might just be what it is, what you choose to do. It has to be a calculated decision. And something that I think every individual who's faced with those moments needs to be able to do, and they need to be under the conviction that the position that they take is the right one, no matter what. Like, I know for me, when I have strong convictions, remaining silent about them is impossible. It one way or another, I'm going to end up sick. I'll be sick if I'm going to be attacked and persecuted for my positions, which has been happening to me really since the beginning of my channel. It's ramped up. It's ramped up a lot. It started with Antifa and a few months ago, and it has gone on, and it will probably continue to go on, no matter what my content looks like going forward. I'm just on the radar of some bit players, and they have fun with being able to kind of throw their social clout around, or their social media presence around, or whatever. And it's just everybody has their own little bit of power, right? And they like to flex when they can, and it's what happens. So all that aside, as a Christian, how do I approach this idea? If it jeopardizes your ability to provide for your family, do you stop? And where do you draw the line on what you push and what you don't push? So there again, for all my faults and failings and the times where I've lost my temper and used crass language, which I'm really working on, like, not letting that get to me. I'm still a Christian. This channel is still motivated by my strong Christian principles, my strong Christian beliefs, and the fact that the Constitution is rooted in Christianity. Sorry, it's just it. I'm sorry, not sorry. It just is. And so if you have a conviction that you're taking the right stand on something, as a Christian, and you know that it's motivated by your Christian principles, and somebody tells you to stop, do you stop? Where do you draw the line? No. I recently released a video talking about 1 Peter 2 and submission to authorities. And it also talks about slaves, bondservants, being submissive to their masters, to their employers. Where do you draw the line there? So, like, if your employer comes up to you and tells you, I don't want you talking about Jesus at work anymore, do you obey? I say you should. Now, somebody comes up and starts the conversation with you, and says, hey, we're on lunch, and I just want to, I don't want your thoughts and feelings, want to gauge where you're at, want to know what you're thinking. I want to probe your worldview. I want to probe your philosophical position on things. And you have that conversation. Are, should you or shouldn't you? But if your employer tells you don't talk about X, Y, or Z anymore while you're working, you should probably listen to them on that one. But what about when your employer or somebody else, let's say, well, let's go with what Peter's talking about there in 1 Peter 2, when he talks about bondservants, and we can use employees and employers in this situation. When your employer says, maybe you go into work for somebody and they became an agnostic or an atheist, and after you started working for them, and they come up to you and they say, hey, you remember all those times we had conversations about Jesus? And you said, like, yeah. And you told me that you like to hand out gospel tracts, or you like to share the gospel in public, or you preach in the open air. Well, I'm an atheist now, and as an atheist, I find that terribly insulting and revolting, and I'm telling you that I don't want you doing that anymore, because people know where you work, and I'm going to have to ask you to stop, because it's embarrassing us. It's embarrassing XYZ glass cleaning company. Do you stop? Or do you politely and respectfully say, no, you're my employer, and I will follow your rules about my activities at work, but my Christian convictions will not allow me to follow your rules about my activity away from here. What do you do? Do you stop? And where do you draw the line? If it's only about the gospel, do you stand up and say, whatever risk I take, people are going to hate me, but I will continue to preach the gospel? What if your employer says, I'm an atheist, and not only am I an atheist, but I'm familiar with the church that you go to, and I think that the position that your church takes on the issue of cultural prevalence of LGBT community, I find it offensive, and I will not have anybody who works for me attending a church like that. It's not about preaching the gospel at that point. Do you stop? What do you do? And these are things that we need to think through, Christians. What counts as a Christian conviction? What counts as a legitimate submission to your employer? And how far into your personal life does your employer's influence get to stand? Now, there are people who say, well, your employer can pretty much do whatever they want with you, because most states are at-will states. And unless they're specifically discriminating against you or persecuting you for your religious beliefs and threatening your livelihood for your religious beliefs, they can can you for whatever reason. They don't even have to have a good one. They can just walk in and go, I don't like you today. You're fired. And that's happened to people, by the way. But what if your principles, what if the things that you believe, there again, as failed and as faulty as you might be in representing them, what if they're built on your Christian convictions? Do you stop to spare your job because your primary motivation is to provide for your family? We have to be thinking about this, because that's where this is going, people. I just released a video about cancel culture, free speech, and government responsibilities. Oh my. And Cancel culture is real. And they have sway over every area of life now. They hold sway over government entities, the cancel culture, the leftist Marxists of this world, the snowflake, easily offended types have a loud voice, a loud voice. And if you say anything that offends them, anything, they will start a campaign against you. I told a story about a guy who was receiving, his employer was receiving over 100 phone calls and over 100 phone calls alone, and massive amounts of emails and contacts or social media about this individual, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds a day. And his wife at her place of employment, her employer was receiving massive amounts of contact. Now her employer didn't act, but his employer fired him eventually because of the social pressure. So these are things that we have to think about, Christians. We have to be of a mind to understand that this is real. And if they can do it to one person, they can do it to anybody else. And we have to know where we're going to stand and where we're not going to stand. And we have to know why we're standing and what we're standing on. And if you're standing on Christian convictions, even if it seems to be about apparent political issues, if you're standing on Christian convictions, then you have to know when to back down or when you don't back down, and what backing down looks like for you. And you do need to think about providing for your family. Those kind of things are going to make you sick. It's going to cause you turmoil, trials, and tribulations. Because if you're a person of principle and you're a person of ethics, and you can screw things up constantly, you can screw up your own ethics, you can make bad decisions. It happens. But if you're a person of principle and you're a person of conviction, and you choose to stand, no matter how convinced you are that you might be right, it's going to be hard. You might lose everything. And it's happening to people all over the country. And the reason that it's still happening is that people aren't standing together. They're not fighting together. We're letting each other suffer. And it's why I interviewed Lisa Hanson. It's why I interviewed Larvina McFarquhar. It's why I interviewed Elisa Monet. It's why I interviewed the owners of the neighbor restaurants, taverns. It's why I interviewed Britt Haskins. It's why I interviewed Melissa of Baby Girls Boutique. It's why I interviewed Laura from West Wedding Company. I continue to reach out to people to want to interview them because I want to give them a platform. I want them to have a place to go where they can tell their story so that maybe it'll reach, even if it's only 20 people. And then maybe those people will be encouraged to tell their story, and somebody else will tell that story, and it'll just keep going. But we have to watch out for one another. And as I said in another video, if they can bring pressure on our employers, if they can bring pressure on our neighborhoods and our communities, if they can bring pressure on our churches. I mean, I know people who have had their churches contacted and have been told, well, if you're going to have a person like that, in your congregation, and you're not going to do anything to silence them, then your church should be considered a social pariah. Like, if they can do that, then we can also stand up for those people who are facing attack. And make no mistake, these are attacks. It's persecution. Communities and employers and government entities, government servants, elected servants, can use whatever terminology and language they want. They can parse it out, and they can take quotes out of context. I mean, that's what happened to this one individual. Like, his employer accused him of actively threatening people. And it was a comment like, "Oh man, you're killing it." It was something like that. And they took that little blurb, no context, and they fired him for that, saying he was advocating violence. What? No matter what you say, no matter what you do, once you're on their radar, they're never going to stop. And they won't stop until we push back. And Christians especially, please listen to what I'm saying. This is not meant to be a chastisement. You need to think about these things. I've had to think about it. Those decisions I make, they're not easy. I don't think about them lightly. But it shouldn't also be very easy to say, I'm going to back down because I got to keep my job, or I don't want to be embarrassed in my neighborhood. What if they egg my house? Things like that, which has happened to me, by the way. So we have to stand strong. And if it's a deeply held conviction, then it's no good having it as a deeply held conviction if you're going to back off at the first sign of trouble. It's what this means right here. It means something. You might kill me, but when you tread on me, I'm gonna bite. That's what that is. It's a rattlesnake. Don't tread on me. It was a warning. You might cut the head off, but it's probably going to get a couple of good bites in before you kill it. And lest we forget, the vast majority of men who fought the war for independence from Britain were strong Christian men who did what they did at great risk to themselves and for their families because of their Christian principles. If it's not worth losing everything for, if it's not worth fighting for, then why hold it as a conviction? We must resist tyranny, even on the small level. We have to push back so that others are able to push back in the future. Because if I compromise on this, then I'll compromise on the gospel. Maybe you won't. But it's coming to that. They're going to drive us underground if we don't stand now. And you might find yourself hiding in a hole next to an atheist who's also been driven underground for having strong convictions about the things that are happening today. So let's stand together now while we can, and let Christians be at the forefront of not backing down. Go serve your King.